Okay, and then after the meeting, I'll post the Zoom class recording right here. Any questions on the setup?
No, ma'am.
Yeah.
Think good.
Okay, we're good? All right.
Is there a due date on the discussion board? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Thursday is the question and Friday is the answer. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Let me open up our PowerPoint deck. I thought I had, but I guess I haven't. Okay, there it is. Okay, here we go. All right, so this week, we're going to learn how to conduct cost volume profit analysis. We call it CVP for short. And I have 4 learning objectives for you. First, to create what's called a contribution margin income statement. And then once we do that, we can determine break-even point, which I've talked to you about a few times over the semester. And then I want you to prove that it's break-even. So I'll show you how to create a proof that actually zeros profit. So we'll do that. And then also have you calculate target profit. In other words, how many units do you have to sell in order to generate a certain amount of profit? So what's that look like? What's that volume look like? And then also something that's called margin of safety, which is a dollar amount that you, like a cushion. So it's a margin of safety, a cushion that you have. So sales could fall by that amount before you'd start losing money. So it tells you, how much sort of flexibility you have in terms of sales. So if you can generate a margin of safety after 6 months of being in business, that's much better than generating a margin of safety after 11 months, because we start the clock over after 12 months, right? So we do yearly income statements. And then I want to also talk to you about determining break-even point and margin of safety for a multi-product firm. So I'm going to start you off by just looking at one product, so it's real simple. And then I'm going to finish up talking to you about multiple products, because our coffee shop does sell multiple items. They sell beans, they sell cups of coffee, they sell baked items, they sell other things. So you got to be able to take these formulas that you're working with here and kind of extrapolate them for a multi-product firm. Okay. These are your tasks. So we have this live session. Then watch your short video lessons for your homework again. Complete that by Wednesday night. Take the quiz Thursday. Create a short answer question. And then the short answer question by Friday. Okay, so let's start with our first learning objective, which is creating a contribution margin income statement. And I want to start with what you already know, which is a traditional income statement. So let's review this. In a traditional income statement, you got sales minus cost of goods sold equals gross profit. Then you subtract your SG&A expenses, and that gives you operating income. So we've been doing this format all semester until now. And then what you have to do is take each cost bucket. So this is a cost bucket, cost of goods sold. And this is a general cost bucket. That's where other payroll expenses are, and advertising and depreciation and so on and so forth. So this is all the operating expenses. And you got to sort them out. And we did this in the last lesson, so you actually already did it. We got to sort out the fixed and the variable. So we're going to take the variable and we're going to put that portion of the variable cost here in this total. And we're going to take the fixed costs and put them down here in this. So we're going to split them up. You did that last week when you did the graphs. And then you created the table for me that has the grand total fixed and grand total variable. That's exactly what you were doing. And you do the same thing with SG&A, which is what you did. You did a graph for every cost that we had. right? You also did revenue, but we're only talking about costs here. So you take all those SG&As that you did last week, you split out the variable and the fixed costs, and you reorganize the statement. So this number and this number are the same, and this number at the bottom and this number are the same. The only difference is you're taking these costs that are here and here, and you're reorganizing them into the fixed and variable pieces. All right, so once you do that, you total them all up in total, and you subtract them from sales, and that gives you something called contribution margin. There's a really important concept here. So this is the amount of money that you make, it's the amount of profit you make after you subtract variable costs from sales. And then you subtract the fixed costs, again in total, to get operating income, okay? So last week we kind of did that, which set us up perfect for this week, because you really already have these grand totals and you can just start using them for the assignment, which is really cool. So the first thing you do for homework this time is actually create this report based on the data you created last week. Okay, so let's look at this contribution margin income statement. Sales, so we have a quantity of $100 a unit. So let's just assume we have one product at $10 a unit. So we multiply across, units times price is total revenue. I'll talk about this percentage in a second. Then the variable costs, they vary with volume, right? So the variable costs were $6 a unit. Again, you got to use the same number here. This is matching principle in action. So there's 100 units, same 100 units that you have here, except it's $6, and we're going to subtract that from this, right? So minus 600 bucks, so 100 times 6 is 600. And then that gives us contribution margin. So same 100 units, matching principle. This 4 is 10 minus 6. So we make $4 a unit at that level. Multiply across, 100 times 4 is 400, or you can subtract. Subtract 600 from 1,000 is 400. All right, now let's talk about these percentages. This 40% is 400 divided by 1,000. So remember when I taught you about gross margin and operating margin and net profit margin, I said you always divide by sales. It's the same thing here on this income statement. We're going to divide by sales. So this 40% is 400 divided by 1,000. Moving up, this 60% is done the same way. 600 divided by 1,000. And then moving up again, this 100 is the same way. 1,000 divided by 1,000 is 1 or 100%. And these ratios you see here will always remain the same in the short term, okay? In the short term. So these are actually fixed. You can assume they're fixed. We call this one here the contribution margin ratio. We use this number a lot in our calculations. All right, now here with fixed costs, we don't generally think about fixed costs in terms of units because they change on a unit level basis. I'm going to show you a couple graphs in a second to help you understand what I'm talking about there. So those, I don't include any per unit values here on purpose because I don't want you to get misled. These are fixed, right, in the short term. These don't change per unit. The number of units can change, so we can sell more. We can sell 200 units, which would make this total go up, but the slope on the line is $10. Every time we sell one unit, we make 10 bucks. Every time we sell one unit, it costs us $6 in variable costs. So we make $4 every time we sell one unit, and that's before we consider fixed costs. All right, so we don't do any per unit. I'm going to talk more about this in a second. So the fixed costs in this example are 300 bucks. So we subtract that from 400, we get 100. So we made $100. We do our percentages same way, 300 over 1,000. So every and then here again, 100 divided by 1,000. So our profit margin is 10%. Whether you're doing a traditional income statement or contribution margin income statement, this number would be the same. But these numbers are different because you don't have these. You don't have these on a traditional income statement. And you'll never find these in a 10K. People don't report this stuff. This is internal information. Okay, so I make this statement down here at the side. Care should be exercised when calculating fixed costs per unit, because the fixed cost per unit decline as volume increases, meaning that this number, the numerator, would stay fixed, but you'd be dividing by, let's say, a bigger and bigger number of units as you sell more. So if you divide by more, and this is fixed, so the numerator is fixed and the denominator is increasing, that's going to cause the unit cost to go down. And I'll show you a graph of that in just a second. We'll prove it. Okay, so fixed costs vary on a per unit basis. Variable costs, on the other hand, vary in total. Like this varies in total because volume varies, but not on a per unit basis. This stays fixed. So does this, and so does this. And these things are important because it gives us tools that we can use to help calculate things like break even. Okay. So here's your $300, right? Fixed, it's a straight line, no slope. Y is 300. You learned how to do that last week. Here's the data that we used. Let me slide that down. Here's the data that we used to get that line, right? So no matter how many units we sold, fixed costs were $300 in total. So no matter how many units across the bottom here, it's going to be $300 in total. Now, if I do the same thing and I graph it on a per unit basis, watch what happens. So you get this downward sloping at a decreasing rate line. Let me show you how that's done. It's $300 in total. If we only sell one unit, then 300 divided by 1 is 300. It costs us $300 in fixed cost per unit if we sell one unit. Okay, $300. Now if we sell 5 units, it's 300 divided by 5, that's $60 per unit. So you can spread the fixed costs out over the 5 units. So each unit is absorbing $60 a piece. And so that's why you see 5 is at 60. And you see this downward sloping line. But the rate at which it declines is going down. All right, now let's look at 10. So if you have double the volume, 10 is double of 5. If you take 300, divide by 10, that's $30 is absorbed by each unit. So you see 10 at $30 per unit, and so on. You get the idea? So in terms of you reducing your per unit costs, you want to sell as many units as you can so you can reduce the cost per unit. Notice that you get the biggest advantage right up front, and then the advantage, right, starts to slow down, right? So the amount that you're able to cut off the cost, the unit cost, starts to slow down. Do you have any questions so far?
No, ma'am.
Okay, here's your variable cost. You saw this one last week, upward sloping. There's your formula. Y is 6x, right? So that means it's $6. The slope on this line is $6 no matter where you are on the line, because it's a linear line. It's not curved. It's not bumpy. It's a straight linear line. So if you sell one unit, you incur $6 of cost. That's that one right there. If you sell 5 units, you incur $30 in total cost. So 5 is associated with $30 in cost. 10 units is associated with $60 in cost. 15 is associated with $90 in cost, and so on. So the slope on that line is 6. That's constant. But in total, you see it increase because you're multiplying by x. Right? If you look at variable costs per unit, you see the straight line, right? Y is 6. So no matter how many units you sell, the variable cost per unit is going to be 6. So graphically, it's a flat line on a per unit basis. All right, let's look at this again. It's the same one I showed you before. I want to just reinforce what we did. So we assume we sold 100 units. That 100 has to travel all the way down because of the matching principle. And we assume that the price in the short term is $10 a unit. Our variable costs are fixed at $6, so that it varies with volume, but it's fixed per unit. You subtract, you get $4 contribution margin per unit. In the short term, that's fixed as well. We're going to make $4 because our price is fixed and our variable costs per unit are fixed. All right, to get these totals, you multiply. Units times price is 1,000. 100 times 6 is 600. 100 times 4 is 400, or you can just subtract 600 from 1,000 to get this. To get these percentages, take it over sales. 400 over 1,000 is 40%. 600 over 1,000 is 60%. And 1,000 over 1,000 is 100. And 300 over 1,000 is 30%. And 100 over 1,000 is 10. Any questions on that now? Feel pretty comfortable with it?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, let's play with it.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, let's do break-even point. The level at which total revenues equal total cost and profit is 0. That's how we define break-even point. So let's start at the bottom of that same income statement and analyze. This is 0. So make that assumption, we're at break-even point. Fixed costs are fixed. So does everyone agree this is going to be 300 no matter what, right?
Yep.
This is fixed, right? All right, so if this is 0 and this is 300, then this must have been 300 because 300 minus 300 is 0. You agree?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
My bad. All right, now I told you this already. This is fixed, so that means I can take 300, work backwards, divide by 4 to get, dang, sorry, it's my bad, 75. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I can actually stop right there because I know this 75 is going to trickle right up because of the matching principle. I can stop right there. And that's my formula for calculating break-even point. I take fixed cost, 300, and I divide by the contribution margin per unit to get the number of units I got to sell to generate a 0 profit. And you can stop right there. You don't have to, but you can. You okay with that?
Sounds pretty easy.
Yeah. I'll show you that formula in a second, but we can prove it too. So take that 75 all the way up. 75 times 10 is 750. 75 times 6 is 450. You subtract that, you get 300. 300 minus 300 is 0. We just proved break-even point. All right, now look what happened. These percentages stayed the same because I told you they were fixed. You can count on them staying the same. What happened here though? Let's compare. There it is. What was it here?
30%. No.
30. Were these the same as that? Let's go back and look.
Yes, ma'am.
160,
Yeah, they were.
40, 30. Let's look. 160, 40. Yes, those are the same, but this one's different. Why? Because it's 300 over a smaller number now. You with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and this, of course, is different too. 0 over 750 is going to be 0. All right, so the point is the formula for break even is fixed costs treated as a positive divided by the contribution margin is the number of units you need to sell to break even. And if you want to get total sales, you take that same number times 10 to get total revenue. Another way of getting the 750 is to take fixed costs, this 300, and divide by 0.4 to get 750. I'm going to give you those formulas. They're right here. Formula for break even in units is fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit. Contribution margin per unit is price per unit, that was the 10, minus variable cost per unit, that was the 6. That's $4. $4. Treat it like positive. Divided by $4 is 75 units to break even. All right, then to get sales dollars, you can do it two ways. You can do fixed cost divided by the contribution margin ratio, the percentage, or you can take break-even units, this, times price, which is $10. Either way is fine. I tend to gravitate to this because I just like it. Right, your contribution margin ratio is the contribution margin divided by sales. You can do it in total, or you can do it per unit. You get the same answer because those per unit values are fixed. So if you run it out, you get 300 over 40% is 750, or you can take 75, which came from here, times the price is 10 and 750. Same answer. Okay, so now let's say we wanted to know how many units it would take to generate a profit of 500. So you start at the bottom, you got 500. You know this is fixed at 300. So adding up to get 800, you're forcing this number because 800 minus 300 is 5. And then you got to go across, go across. This is fixed. So divide by 4, you get 200. So 200 units would have to be sold to generate a profit of 500 bucks. And you can roll that rate out and prove it. And in fact, it works beautifully. Do you get it?
Yes, ma'am. And so I have a question. So the percent of sales, and the variable cost percentage will stay the same, or
Always. And this too.
and the contribution
too.
margin percentage.
Notice that this changed, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Because sales are going up, so now this is coming down, just like the per unit value comes down. And notice this is going up because that money is going up relative to that.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep. All right, there's a shortcut formula for running this out. This is what we call a proof. So here's your, oh shoot, hang on a second. Let me show it to you. There's your formula right there. Fixed cost plus target profit. So whatever your target profit is divided by the contribution margin per unit will give you the number of units. All right, let me back up because I want to do that other one with you too. And then we're pretty much close to the end. All right, so we just finished this one. You take fixed costs at 800 plus 500, divide by 4. That's the shortcut formula to get 200. Okay. Next one I want you to think about. Let's say we want to know, this one relates to your homework. How many units would it take to generate an operating margin of 30%? So let's think about that. Let me go back right here. This last one we just did, we had an operating margin of 25%. So I'm asking you how to sell to get this up to 30. Okay, to get this up to 30. Well, if this is 30, and you know this is fixed at 40, we just went through that. This is fixed at 40. That means this can't be any more than what? So if you want this to be 30, and this is 40, it's fixed at 40, this can't be any more than what?
Any more than 40? Yes. Or
10.
10.
Because
Okay.
40 minus 10 is
30.
30, right? So I'm kind of backing into that. What's that got to be? So let's try that. So at 30% profit margin, fixed cost would have to be 10% of sales. Do you agree with that?
That's what we're going for. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, meaning 40 minus 30 is 10. So set that formula, that sales times 10% should equal 300. Therefore, 300 divided by 10 is 3,000 in sales, which is 300 units, right? 3,000 divided by the price. And operating income would be 900 bucks. Let's prove it. Here it is. So 300 units at 10 bucks a piece is 3 grand. Variable costs are 6, so that's 1,800. That means contribution margin is 1,200. You can get that by multiplying across or subtracting. These numbers are fixed always in the short term. There's your 300 bucks, and what do you know? You got 900 bucks at the bottom, which when you divide that by total revenue is 30%. So it's just a really great tool. These are awesome little shortcuts for helping you make decisions about volume, break-even point, profit margins, all things you want to tinker with as a manager. How are we doing for time? Oh, pretty good. Excellent. Okay, I was worried. All right, so here's that shortcut formula again. You take fixed cost plus target profit. So it'd be 300 plus 900. And notice what that gives you. Let me back you up. That gives you 1,200. And then you divide that by 4 to get the units. Does that shortcut make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep. And then to get the sales dollars, there's a couple of ways you can do it. Take the fixed cost plus the target profit, which would be that 1,200 again. And this time divide by the CM ratio, 40%, because that's fixed, percent of sales. And that'll give you the sales revenue. Or the way I like to do it is you take the 300 that you got up above times the price, that gives you the sales. And so you're just working, I call it working this inside out. Working this inside out, right? Because of these relationships that exist, and certain things are fixed and certain things, and those little shortcut tools, and they work. All right, one last concept to share. It's called margin of safety. And then I got a little bit to do with the multiple products. Margin of safety is super easy. All you do is take whatever sales you're targeting. So let's say you budget sales at a certain level. You subtract from that budget the break-even sales. And that's it. That's how you get margin of safety. That's your cushion you have before you start losing money. And then you do the same thing with units. The same units that relate to those sales minus break-even units. And that gives you the number of units sales could drop before you start losing money. So let's look at the next several slides. So I want to show you break-even again. So break-even sales was 750 and break-even units was 75 units. So here it is. There it is right there. 75, 750 is sales and units. It generates no money, no profit at that level. Here's the next one. So let's say sales are now up 25 from break-even, right? So now we're at 100 versus, let me go back, 75. So now we're at 100. So the margin of safety is 25 units. And the margin of safety in dollars is 1,000. Let me go back, minus 750 break even. So it's 250. Does this make sense? It's just your cushion.
This one.
Yeah, let's do another one. Okay, this one's 2,000. Okay, 200 units generates 2,000 in sales. So we're going to compare this one. Let me go back to this one, break even, and subtract. So 2,000 minus 750 is 1,250 in sales. 200 right here minus the 75. Let me go back right there is 125 units. And I'll do one more. This one's 3,000, right? So that's 300. So 3,000 minus the 750 is 2,250, and 300 minus 75 is 225 units. You can get that again by multiplying this times 10, give you the same thing, price. What do you think, easy?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, one more thing. Here's this multiple product stuff. Do you remember last week when you did the assignment, you had to deal with weighted average units and weighted average price and weighted average costs? It was part of your assignment on the first tab. I'm not sure you really picked up on that thoroughly, but this week we're going to be using those numbers, so hopefully that'll kind of sink in a little bit more. So this happens when you have multiple products. Up to this point, I've been working with you as though we only sold one product, and that product had a price of $10 and a margin of 4. But what happens if you have 10 products? Right? 10 different products. Well, you got 10 different prices, you got 10 different costs. And so you have to compute weighted average of those costs. And you can do that by taking the grand totals for the year and dividing the total cost by the total units. That'll give you a weighted average cost. Or you can use the sales mix to do it. So for instance, we know that 65% of our cafe sales are coffee cups. So we'd say 65% of the coffee cost, which we charge our customers, is the weighted price for that portion of our price. And we add all those pieces together based on the percentage of sales. That's a little bit more work, but it gives you the same answer. Okay, you do the same thing with contribution margin ratio. You take the contribution margin for each product line, and you can weight it by this percent of sales. So 65% for coffee, 35% for everything else. Add those two pieces together, and that gives you the weighted average contribution margin. Or you can do it the easy way. Just take the grand total contribution margin divided by the grand total sales for all of the units. And that gives you a weighted average contribution margin. So then after that, it's the same formula that you had before. So the only thing you got to do is get these weighted contribution margins. And then you're ready to roll. It's exactly the same formula. fixed cost plus target profit divided by contribution margin per unit. Just this time you're doing a weighted one. Same thing here to get sales dollars. Fixed cost plus target profit equals weighted CM ratio. Notice this is the same formula for break even. The only difference is at break even, target profit is what? 0. So all you end up with is fixed cost plus 0 divided by weighted contribution margin per unit. All right, so that's the only thing you got to do different there. And I'm running you through a few examples. I looked at this again this morning and I thought, well, I hope that's not too confusing. But just real quick, I want to walk you through. So we have two products, A and B. The sales on A are 600, the sales on B are 400, and these are their prices and volumes and costs and contribution margins each. And so we make a total of, so our sales is 1,000. Our variable cost is 500. So if you multiply this and add it to this, you get 500. So we make 500 bucks on this. Our product A is 60% of sales. That's 600 divided by 1,000. And product B is 40% of sales. That's 400 divided by 1,000. And so these are your sales mix ratios. So to get a weighted average price, take the price of A, which is 10, times 60%. The price of B, which is 5, times 40%. So our weighted average price is $8. Do the same thing with weighted average cost. So 5 times 60, 250. That should have a dollar sign in front of it. Times 40% equals $4 weighted average cost, variable cost. Contribution margin, same idea. We make $5. 10 minus 5 is 5. $5 times 60%. And on product B, we make 250. 5 minus 250 is 250 times 40%. So that's your weighted average contribution margin. And then your weighted average units would be 1,000 in sales divided by $8 is 125 weighted average units. So you can use those weights to give you the weighted average units. Okay, so remember our units here were 140, but you got to weight them based on the percentages. So it gives you 125. All right, and then I did some more calculations for that. So based on if fixed costs are this, contribution margin is this, that gives us 50 weighted average units to break even, or 400 bucks in revenue. You can get that going this way too, and your variable costs and your contribution margin and your fixed costs in total, so that profit is 0 at break even. So this is a proof right here. 400 minus 200 is 200, minus 200 is 0. And then if you want to bust it back out by product line, you can take the 50 times 60%, you get 30 units of A. That's product A. And then for product B, 50 times 40% is 20 units of product B. So that's how that would break down. It's a ratio of 2 to 1, right? 30 to 20 is a ratio of 2 to 1. And by the way, your margin of safety is $600, meaning 1,000 in sales minus 400, break even, or 75 units, which is 125 minus 50. This is another way to get it, 75 times your weighted average price. So it's really, you're just using the averages based on the sales mix. Okay, we made it. And we have about 10 minutes to spare. I know some of you have another class. Okay, so we created a contribution margin income statement that just sorts the costs out into the variable and fixed components. We need that so that we can run things like break-even point easily. We can't do this unless we know this. Okay, so we were able to do that, and then we were able to play around with that and figure out, okay, if I want to make 900 bucks this month, how many units do I have to sell? And it's super easy to figure that out. You use those little shortcuts I gave you. And things like margin of safety and sales and units are really important. What's your cushion? And then finally, using multiple products. When you have multiple products, you just have to compute weighted average sales price and weighted average variable cost and weighted average contribution margin. And then you're ready to run. Okay, so again, one more time, here's your tasks for the week. What questions do you have?
As of now, none for me. But if I have any questions, we could just shoot you an email, correct?
Yeah, and if you want to get on Zoom, that's always an option too.
Yes, ma'am. I
Yep.
appreciate it.
Okay.
All
Anybody
seems
else?
pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's fun actually.
Hmm.
Yeah.
After right, this one's going on Sit Learn as well, I guess.
I'll record. Well, it is recorded. Once I have the recording, I'll post it on SitLearn.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great.
And then of course there's recordings, there's YouTube videos for every single tab of the assignment.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. Have fun with that.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry I was late. I have to do that again.
No problem. Have a good day. Thank you.
All right, you too.
Have a good day.
You too.
Have a good one.
You too.